Welcome to Fairy Tales Retold, where we uncover the dark origins of your favorite childhood stories. I'm your host, and each week we bring you the creepiest, most terrifying tales from history. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss next week's terrifying tale. Now let's dive into the twisted world of fairy tales. Now let me ask you this. What if the fairy tales you grew up with were never meant for children? What if the seemingly innocent stories of Cinderella, Snow White, and Little Red Riding Hood had much darker origins? Well, let me tell you, they do. And today we're going to explore the horrifying truth behind these beloved stories. Let's start with Cinderella. We all know the story of the young woman who attends the royal ball in elaborate garments and loses one of her golden slippers while escaping. But what we do know is that the original tale is far from the Disney version we're all familiar with. In the original version of Cinderella, the stepsisters aren't just jealous of her beauty. They're consumed by it. When the king announces a ball and Cinderella's father asks if she wants to attend, the stepsisters jump at the chance to show off their own beauty. But they're not above doing whatever it takes to get ahead. After cutting off their toes to make the glass slipper fit, they try to trick Cinderella's father into thinking they are the ones who received the mysterious invitation. When he eventually realizes it was Cinderella who was chosen, the stepsisters are furious. They chase after her, determined to stop her from going to the ball. But Cinderella escapes and meets the fairy godmother, who transforms her rags into a beautiful gown and her pumpkin into a carriage. Of course, Cinderella attends the ball and captivates everyone there, including the prince. But when the clock strikes midnight, her transformation is reversed, and she flees, leaving behind one of her golden slippers. The prince finds the shoe and becomes enamored with it, not because he saw Cinderella at the ball, but solely due to its small size. He becomes obsessed with finding its owner and is willing to marry whoever it fits. When the shoe is brought before the stepsisters, they try to force it onto their feet, determined to be the one to capture the prince's attention. But it doesn't fit either of them. Then they bring Cinderella forward, and the shoe fits her perfectly. The stepsisters are furious and try to harm her, but Cinderella escapes and finds happiness with the prince. So as you can see, the original Cinderella is much darker than the version we're all used to. The emphasis on the shoe's small size and the prince's obsession with it add a disturbing undertone to the story. Next, let's discuss Snow White. We all know the story of the young princess whose beauty is envied by her stepmother, the evil queen. When the queen learns that Snow White is more beautiful than her, she orders a huntsman to take the girl into the forest and bring back her liver and lungs as a dish for her to eat. But the huntsman takes pity on Snow White and lets her go, instead killing a deer and bringing the queen its heart and lungs. Snow White then flees into the forest and comes across a cottage inhabited by 7 dwarfs. She cleans the house and cooks for the dwarfs in exchange for their protection. Meanwhile, the queen, consumed by jealousy, discovers Snow White is alive and disguises herself as an old peddler woman to trick her. She offers Snow White a poisoned apple, which immediately puts the princess into a death-like sleep. The queen, believing Snow White to be dead, throws her into a glass case and places her in a nearby cave. One day, a prince happens upon the cave and is captivated by Snow White's beauty. Despite her being in a deep sleep, he carries her back to his castle, where she is eventually awakened by a kiss. The prince and Snow White fall in love and soon marry. So while we all know the story of Snow White, what many of us don't know is that the original tale is even darker. In the original version, Snow White isn't taken into the forest to be merely abandoned. She's taken there to be killed. And when the huntsman shows up at the queen's castle with a different animal's organs, it's because he couldn't bring himself to kill the girl. Furthermore, in the original tale, the queen doesn't merely eat a poisoned apple. She is tricked into eating it by the disguised good fairy. And instead of falling into a deep sleep, Snow White's heart actually stops beating. It is only because the prince happens to be a descendant of a powerful king that he has the ability to awaken her with a kiss. Finally, let's talk about Little Red Riding Hood. We all know the story of the young girl who goes into the forest to visit her grandmother, only to be outsmarted and eaten by a big bad wolf. But did you know that there are several versions of this tale with varying outcomes? In some versions, Little Red Riding Hood does escape the wolf, but in others, she's not so lucky. In the most popular version, after encountering the wolf, Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother are both devoured. This may seem like a grim ending for a children's story, but it's actually more in line with the original tale. In fact, in some early versions of the story, the wolf not only eats Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother, but also a little dog that was accompanying them. The inclusion of the dog adds a disturbing element to the story, suggesting that no one is safe from the wolf's appetite. These stories were once told as warnings, not bedtime dreams. So there you have it. Some of the most beloved fairy tales of our time have incredibly dark origins. From Cinderella to stepsisters cutting off their toes to fit the glass slipper to Snow White's stepmother being forced to dance to death in burning shoes. These stories are filled with disturbing imagery that would make anyone's skin crawl. And let's not forget Little Red Riding Hood, whose encounter with the big bad wolf was often a one-way ticket to becoming a midnight snack. It's fascinating to see how these seemingly innocent tales have evolved over time, and the horrifying versions that were once told to warn children about the dangers of the world. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes. Until then, stay safe and keep an eye out for wolves in sheep's clothing.